Miss Lee, can we have you on stage? Let me get the opportunity of sharing the stage with you.
Hello, hi everyone. Good to see everybody.
Miss Lee,
Thank you so much.
Before you start, there's a question we've been wanting to ask you.
Sure, go for it.
All right. So apart from sharing the secret recipe to exponential growth, you absolutely must share your secret formula on something else too. Are you all set and prepared for it?
Okay, go for it. Curious what you have to ask.
Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Lee is a graduate of Harvard College and Harvard Business School. How does that even happen?
I got really lucky. I just got really, really lucky. I could not get in today. The students are so smart. Yeah,
that's you being really, really modest. Miss Lee, so how does that even happen, right? And while you let us know, let me quickly bring my notepad. I don't even want to miss a semicolon of this.
Yes, well, I went to college and I wasn't even going to become a business person. I wanted to be a doctor. And along the way, I realized I loved business and leading and creating strategies and growing businesses. And I realized I didn't know enough. So I applied back to business school after a few years of working, and miraculously I got in. So I decided to go back. As you can imagine, it was very comfortable to go back to the same town and everything, but it was completely different studying business than being there in college. And the best part are all the other students that I got to learn with and still to this day continue to connect with.
Miss Lee, fantastic answer. And let me tell you, the only thing I deduced from that was if it were up to you, you would have become a very successful doctor as well.
Yes. Wasn't in the cards for me. I'm the black sheep of the family. Everyone else is doctors. So
fantastic. Ms. Lee, thank you so very much for gracing our session. Stage is all yours.
Thank you so much. And I'm excited to talk today about some some important topics that are really important to me and I'm very passionate about. And I'm just going to put up my slides here so you can see them. As Nikita was mentioning, I'm going to talk today about the secret to driving disruptive growth. And the core of my research, and especially the work I've been doing, is helping leaders thrive with disruption. And in particular, I was really curious about why is it that some organizations are able to continue to disrupt over and over again, whereas others just feel like they're stuck in the place where they are and can't move out of it. And the secret I found was something very, very simple. It is that these disruptive organizations look at disruption as an opportunity for change. They see disruption and change, and the bigger the disruption, whether it was something in the environment around them or something they create themselves, as something that they can use to drive growth. Whereas other companies, and for many of us, we see disruption coming our way, and we're running the other direction. We're trying to avoid disruption, and these disruptive organizations instead run towards it. And yet they know something very interesting. They realize that it's not disruption that drives growth. It's actually just the opposite. It's growth that creates disruption. And let me explain this a little bit, because we all want to grow as leaders, grow as organizations. And as we get closer and closer to that growth edge, the time when we're going to have to make some really tough decisions, it's really hard at that point, because if we go over that point, everything is going to change. We're going to be so disrupted. And many organizations look at that change and go, it's not for me. I don't want to do this. It's too hard. I'm going to go back to where we were today. And disruptive organizations instead, they're very honest about how difficult the growth journey is going to be. So they come against this obstruction, this obstacle, this disruption in front of them, and they plow right through it. They know how difficult it is because they have prepared themselves for this journey ahead. Disruption and growth, exponential growth, is not for the faint of heart. It is for people who have the courage to see the future, be able to take the decisions today to make that future happen and align everybody in the organization against that future vision. So I'm going to talk today about three things. I'm going to first of all talk about how do you see the future? And that's extremely hard, because You're sitting here today. We can barely even figure out what's happening here today. How do we think about what that future is going to look like? And the second thing is, as a leader, we have to lead very differently when we're trying to create disruptive growth. We have to create movements. And the third thing I want to talk about is, how do we create cultures that are able to deal with all the flux and change? That the more change you throw at the culture, the stronger it becomes. So let's talk about seeing the future, first of all. Now, here in the United States, we have this crazy game called ice hockey. And one of the greatest players who ever played this was Wayne Gretzky. And he had this famous quote: "He didn't skate to where the puck is. He skates to where the puck will be." So everybody on the ice sees where the puck is. And of course, they're running towards that. They're skating towards that. And he's hanging out on another part of the ice. And people are wondering, why is he there? And miraculously, the puck goes towards him. Now, this is partly just immense talent, but it was also something that he trained himself to do. As a child, he would sit in front of the television, and he would sit there with a pad of paper. He would trace the rink on that pad, and he would sketch out all the plays that were happening. He would see where people were, where the ice was, and they would see where the puck was, and he could anticipate and track and learn where pucks would go, given a certain formation. He would watch this and then take it onto the ice and replay it in his head, and he would try it. And every once in a while, he'd get the puck, actually guess right. And he practiced this over and over again. And he got so good, he was almost always right. And that's what we have to do in order to see the future. We have to practice anticipating what the future will look like, hone our skills, understand and develop a gut feeling, and back it up with deep research and data. All those analytics to give us the confidence to say, we see what the future could look like, and we will be there when it gets there. Now, let me give you a case study of one company that did a great job of doing this, and that is Adobe. They make all this marketing and design software. And back in 2010, they realized they had a problem. Their customers were extremely happy with them. They pretty much dominated the market. And those customers would buy the product and then own it forever. It appeared in packages and on CD-ROMs. But the world was changing. More and more people were coming up and starting to use all of these digital forms, publishing themselves online, and wanted access to this type of technology. But it's like $800, sometimes $3,000 to get access to it. They could never afford it. Also, it was the rise of the mobile phone and of devices and tablets. They don't accept CD-ROMs. So Adobe realized that the world was moving more towards the cloud, where they could offer fractional access to each of these technologies for just a little bit, just even $10, $15 a month. And yet they realized there were some major problems. First of all, their existing customers wanted nothing to do with this new product. They liked owning the product forever and not having to keep paying Adobe. The second problem is that their employees, the entire organization, was geared towards serving these existing customers. And the third thing is that they knew that if they made this change, they would lose money for 2 years, being unprofitable. And as a publicly traded company, this was going to be very dangerous, because if their stock price dipped down, they would be potentially targets for a hostile takeover. And yet, when they looked at the opportunity for this future, they realized they had to go and try for it. Everything that they could see in the marketplace, all the data, they ran so many scenarios, did so much research, pointed to the opportunity that was there and the amount of disruption they could create if they were able to pull this off. So they looked each other in the eyes, decided, yes, we're going to do this, and they jumped in. So let me show you what happened, and I'll use numbers to tell the story. So this is all indexed back to Q4 2011 when they decided to make this change. And their revenues, they were able to maintain them pretty steady state throughout the entire time. And as expected, the revenues tanked starting in year 2 because people started moving from buying the packaged software into the cloud. And they weren't able to necessarily cover all the costs. So the profits just tanked in first quarter of 2013. And literally, this is what the CEO and the CFO did when they went to Wall Street. They said, we've got great news. We lost a ton of money. Our plan is exactly on track. We lost exactly the amount of money that we anticipated. It means that our strategy is working. Isn't this fantastic? I mean, who goes to Wall Street and says, we lost a ton of money, it's great? Well, this is what Wall Street said. The stock price went up and up and up. And every time they reported another quarter of loss, proving that the business model was working, the stock price went up again. So many organizations say, I can't make this change. I can't go through this digital transformation. My shareholders would never accept it. They will accept it if you paint a picture of what the future could look like. And the key here is to not be blinded by your current customers, because you literally have to put on disruption sunglasses, because while your current customers are beautiful and they're profitable, they're not necessarily the customers of your future. And the best way to understand who these customers are is to create an empathy map, to deeply understand who these future customers are, and then be able to share them across the entire organization. You may not remember the demographics, the psychographics, the personas, but we will remember how we stood in the shoes of those future customers, understood what they say, do, feel, and think, because this is important. The 3 questions every disruptive organization should be able to answer across every single employee. And this is a key thing that I do when I begin working with a new company. I like to go in and walk around or virtually walk around and ask these 3 questions. The first one is, who's our future customer? Can you tell me who this person is? Tell me about them. How much do you know? Do you even know who that future customer is? Have you spent any time thinking about the future? The second thing is, what's your strategy to be able to meet that future? A strategy is just a way to get from here to there. And if you don't know where there is, and you don't know what you're going to do and who you're going to serve at the other end, that's not a strategy. That's a budget. That's a short-term execution plan with no long-term consequences and actions. And the third question every employee should be able to answer is, do you know how you are contributing to the success of that strategy? How are you contributing to meeting the needs of that future customer today? What on your personal dashboard tells you how to do this? In disruptive organizations, there is tremendous alignment around who that customer is, what the strategy is, and what every single person is doing to achieve that goal. So that's the key about seeing the future. It's seeing the future together as an organization, trying to create that growth to meet those future needs. So I want to go on and talk about creating movements, because leadership is such an important part of creating disruption and growth. And leadership is simply a relationship between people who aspire to create change and the people who aspire to follow them and to help them create that change. And I'll just use another example from the civil rights movement in the United States and Martin Luther King Jr. and the civil rights movement. And this is a picture of him, not silhouetted by the Lincoln Memorial, but in front of the huge crowd that he was trying to motivate that day. And he realized his speech wasn't working well, so he tossed it aside and began his famous speech, "I have a dream." And he painted this picture in vivid colors, in vivid words. The movement of that words continues even today, and it rings in our hearts. And we remember that because the key thing is during those dark days of that journey, when you're creating that disruption, creating that growth, you're going to come across days when you just are so discouraged. And those words, that connection to a movement, to something bigger than yourself, is absolutely essential. And you know you're creating a movement, actually, if it moves without you. This requires that we think about things in a very different way. How do we motivate people so that even when we're not there, they remember the purpose, they remember the future that we're trying to create? One of the best ways to do this as a leader is to lay out your plan. You have a future of where you want to achieve, but be really clear and do what I call a 6-quarter walk. In this quarter, this quarter today, this is what we're going to accomplish with our digital transformation, what we're going to accomplish with our exponential growth strategies. And this is how you're going to be impacted. The next quarter, this is what it's going to look like. And this is how we're going to execute then. 3 quarters, 4 quarters, 5 quarters, 6 quarters out. And the reason why that's so important, you can now see how it all builds on top of each other. The mistake I often find is people think, we're going to smash all of that into the next quarter. Totally unrealistic. We also want to give people who are chomping at the bit, who want to go faster. Well, we may not get there here this quarter, but we will get there 2 quarters from now. And your credibility as a leader is your ability to deliver on that 6-quarter walk every single quarter. And guess what happens the next quarter? Well, you keep extending it to another quarter. So there's a rolling 18-month plan of what you're going to accomplish, how you're going to transform things and drive growth. Another really key thing that leaders do is they put things on the agenda, on the table for people to work on, and they take things off. If we're going to go from here to there, what things will matter? What do we have to start doing? But just as importantly, what are we going to stop doing? Disruptive organizations don't just keep piling things off. They keep prioritizing and understanding what's the most important things we have to do. And then last thing is you have to communicate constantly and consistently. Jeff Weiner, who is the CEO of LinkedIn during its huge growth phase, had this habit of beginning every single meeting with a recitation of the mission of LinkedIn to connect the world's professionals. And then he would bring in a value or a strategic point. For example, we put members first as a reminder to everybody about why they're there. And one employee was getting tired of him doing this. So he asked him, when are you going to stop doing this, Jeff? Because we hear you're doing this all the time. And he wisely said, I will stop doing this when people stop looking surprised. The reality is, as leaders, we may say it and we think it was so crystal clear, but unless we repeat it again and again and again, for us to be reminded why we are here, we will forget. We'll get focused on our work. We'll get distracted by something else that's going over there. And we need to be reminded every day, all the time, of why we are here, our purpose, our strategy, our commitments to each other. So I encourage you to think about how your leadership needs to change. And the last thing I want to go into is to talk about how culture needs to change. And in particular, how do you build a flux culture? Now, sometimes you may think that the culture that you have is that culture that you got, and you can't change it. That's not true at all. You can absolutely change your culture, because culture is just simply made up of your beliefs and the behaviors. If you want your culture to change, start changing the behaviors, and they will eventually change your beliefs. Or even better, start changing the beliefs. Get rid of the self-limiting beliefs that you have individually and also as an organization, and your behaviors will change. In my research, we found that organizations have 3 very specific beliefs in disruptive organizations, and they're openness, the belief that sharing more information creates accountability and trust, that agency exists, that employees begin acting as owners, and they take on the responsibility, thanks to openness, of making decisions, of making changes, and owning the consequences of what happens. And the third belief is that there is a bias for action, because your customers are moving further and further away from you, and you're going to have to constantly chase after them. There's no time to make sure that things are perfect. And in fact, you're going to be able to get to the end of where your customers are to meet them by making sure you're constantly testing with them. So I encourage you to take a look at your organization and ask, what are the beliefs that are holding us back? Sit down with your team and talk to each other and ask, what are the things that we say to each other that we no longer want to hold on to? And then understand what they are, group them together, and then make a commitment to each other that you are no longer going to believe these things. There are things like, we need permission. We need to ask for permission and get permission before we can act. Another belief is, we don't have enough budget. Well, you would if you decide to stop doing things. What are the beliefs that hold you back from creating that transformation and exponential growth? And replace those instead with beliefs that are going to move you forward. So just to close out for today, I believe that if you want to have this growth, you're going to have to move out of your comfort zone. There is no easy path. There is no easy button. I wish I had a magic wand that I could wave and it'll just be fixed, but there is no easy way to do this. So prepare yourself to move out of your comfort zone. And in particular, look for the very edges. Don't just get out of your comfort zone. Go to the very edge of what you think is possible, because you don't know how far you can go until you go to that very edge. Take yourself and your team, walk over to that edge, explore it, look over that precipice, and you will feel this crazy feeling. Your palms will be sweating. And then like, that's crazy to go that far. But then take one step back and know that you're on solid ground. And more importantly, you're there together. And then stay at that edge. Don't go back to your comfort zone. Stay at that edge. We all experienced that edge back in the Q1 of 2020, when COVID hit, when the pandemic hit. There was huge amounts of uncertainty. There were no rule books. Everything was unknown and uncertain. And look at how far we have gotten. If anything, that should give us even more confidence that we can take on huge amounts of uncertainty that we never thought ourselves capable of. And what happens? What is confidence in the end? Confidence isn't being sure that everything is going to work out, that you're going to be successful. That's not what confidence is. You have confidence when you know that no matter what happens, you're going to be okay. And if you prepare yourself along that journey, if you bring yourself and your teams together on that journey and you're supporting each other, you will be okay because you are prepared. You have done the hard work. You deserve to be on this road to be able to see that future. So just remember that disruption is an opportunity for change. I encourage you to stay in touch with me. You can connect with me and follow me on all the various social media platforms. Here's my email. And you can also go to my website, charlenely.com/DTS Southeast Asia, and download these slides and access so many other resources. Again, I just want to wish you all the best in your journey to disruptive growth. It is a fantastic place to be. And I encourage you to embrace that, let go of those limiting beliefs, and see how far you can fly. Thank you so much.
Ms. Lee, my God, disruption doesn't create growth. Growth creates disruption. I'm pretty sure this can be applied to just about everything in life. And honestly, that sounded like the best motivational speech I've ever heard. It's better than any TED Talks that we've ever heard. And I speak on behalf of everyone. We actually got a little emotional towards the end as well as the mid-half. That too in a digital summit. Wow, absolutely fantastic. Ms. Lee, what a start to the session. Thank you so very much for gracing today. Thank you so much.
Thank you again for the opportunity. Enjoy the rest of the summit.